Hi folks, welcome to the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast by Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter. In this podcast, Gary shares everything about servant leadership, service leadership, authentic leadership, how to create high performance cultures, service excellence and life balance. Here's your host, Gary Ryan.
Thank you, Sienna, for your lovely introduction. I really appreciate your work for us. And welcome to Sophie Tversky, who is our special guest on the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast for this current episode. Sophie has an extraordinary history. We actually met when Sophie was a participant in the Law Ambassador program, a leadership program back in 2016. And Sophie turned up early to one of the sessions, and I was obviously there early too because I was facilitating the session. And we struck up a conversation and through other various programs that Sophie participated in back in those days. And I've been watching Sophie through our connection on LinkedIn. It's one of the great pleasures of the work that I do with the various students that I'm connected with is to see them actually grow and go into their careers over time. Sophie was declared a lawyer in November 2020, I think is the correct date, having worked at KPMG, Deloitte, and now at Nexus Communications in Canada. Sophie has a long list of awards, so I am going to read these out to you. A Learning and Teaching Committee Student Recognition Prize from the Faculty of Law at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. The Leadership Excellence Award with John Bertrand AO, and John Bertrand is a legend in Australia, so any award named after him is absolutely fantastic. The Australian Law Awards Law Student of the Year, a finalist. The Victorian Legal Awards Law Student of the Year finalist, and winner of the Women in Law Awards Law Student of the Year. And Sophie has also been published in a chapter of a book around wellbeing and law. So, Sophie, it's a delight to have you join us for the podcast. How did you end up in Canada?
Thank you so much for having me, Gary. It's such a pleasure to be here speaking with you. So I'm really going to focus on the development journey. So for me, coming to Canada is one of personal and professional development. So like many of us, particularly in Melbourne, we felt and experienced the long lockdown during the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think whether big or small, that event really did instigate a lot of reflection on life, on purpose, on values alignment. And I think for me, was I driving change in the areas I really wanted to drive change in? And so that really for me was a huge inflection point in the start of some big questions I was starting to ask myself. Then also I was selected and was a participant in the International Women Forum's Emerging Women Leaders program, which was an immense privilege. I was with amazing women, big thinkers, big hearts, and we created space for each other to tell stories. And we learnt from professionals in a cross-section of different fields. And I came out of every single session with more questions than answers, which I feel like is the sign of a very good program. And so that was a second element that really encouraged a lot of reflection in my life. And then I was a scholarship recipient to a creativity and innovation conference here in North America called the Creative Problem Solving Institute. And I felt like I was meeting my tribe. These were people who were really stretching their thinking about how to solve some really big business and world problems and opportunities. And so I felt like that was an amazing platform and people to connect with, to really delve into the concepts of innovation and creative problem solving. So those three things came together, and I did my annual goal setting, which involves lots of vision boarding, lots of cutouts of magazines, and trying to picture of, well, I'm asking myself a lot of these questions. What does that look like? And what does that mean for me? And I really landed on one question, which was, what is the growth or the stretch I'm looking for? And I thought I was really curious around that question, and I spent a lot of time reflecting on it and speaking to people about what does stretch look like in their lives. And I have always wanted to live overseas. I've wanted to explore a different culture, a different business culture, meet new people, to really step into the dynamic of both certainty and spontaneity.
Yes.
And so I took the leap, really. An opportunity arose to come to Canada, and I embraced the yes. And that's been a thematic in this journey. And I've been here now 4 months, and I really am living and breathing the yes and. From meeting different people and building community, to spontaneously going on a road trip with some people I met to a concert, to discovering a different business culture and the norms and behaviors which surround that. I think I also want to mention as well that this journey in Canada is really giving to light the dynamic between certainty and spontaneity, which is what I mentioned. I think as humans, we have a tendency to pit two concepts against each other and put a versus in the middle, that they can't coexist. Here, the dynamic is certainty and spontaneity. And how do you get the best of both? And that's what I'm really exploring.
Okay, I love it. I love it. I love the big question. What is the growth or stretch that I'm looking for? You know, the significant networking that you've done. So there's a lot of detail, no doubt, in the opportunity that just spontaneously arose. But on one level, it's not spontaneous when you're doing the work and you're exploring, and you're an explorer and you're looking for answers. You've got big questions that are guiding the direction of your activities. You're maintaining curiosity, because, Sophie, that was something that I remember when we first met, is your curiosity. Right from that very first conversation, you were curious towards me. I mean, a lot of students back in those days sit there and think, oh my gosh, I'm sitting next to this facilitator. How can I, what an uncomfortable scenario. That wasn't you at all. You were curious. And the work that you did in starting organisations when you were in that law program. I can't remember the name of the little group that you started. What was that you started at law at Monash?
So during my time at Monash, I founded and led the not-for-profit, the Victorian chapter of the not-for-profit, The Legal Forecast, which was a not-for-profit run by early career professionals, centered on rethinking how law is delivered, practiced, and taught, and really examining that through the lens of creativity, creative problem solving, and innovation as well.
Yes. So the creativity and the problem solving themes been strong now for many years for you.
Yes.
And now you've found yourself in a role where you're getting to practice that every day. I am curious about how do you define those two, creativity and innovation?
Absolutely. So for context, I have just begun what will culminate into a 2-year program of a Master's of Science in Creativity and Change Leadership. And interestingly, the World Economic Forum names creativity and original thinking as core skills for the future of work. And we know that in our lives, in our businesses, in our world, we have significant challenges and opportunities facing us. So there's never been more of an important time to delve into what is creative problem solving, what is originality, and what is innovation. So just before, to define some terms, because I think we throw around these terms often.
Yes.
Creativity is the precondition to innovation. So creative problem solving is the process of going from problem finding, so clarifying what problem you want to solve, understanding the end users and any stakeholders involved, to brainstorming possibilities to solving that problem, to then developing that problem and developing that idea further, and then implementing those ideas and really creating change and action.
Yes.
So here we're busting some myths. Here we're busting the myth that creativity is solely about artistic creativity, and that's one type. But actually, every single person is creative when they solve a problem in a way that's new and valuable. Yes. And that also means that creativity involves both broad blue sky thinking and careful evaluation. These two things have to occur, but they don't occur at the same time. Our brains we know from research that our brains can't do what we call divergent or broad thinking and convergent, so evaluative thinking, at the same time.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes.
So the other myth is that creativity is a flash of inspiration. And we know this as the aha moment that we read about often with artists.
Yes.
And the beauty of creative problem solving is that actually these skills can be taught and practiced anytime you have a problem that you want to solve creatively. And the good thing is that because it can be taught and practiced, there are some tips and tricks that I can share so that people can do straight away.
Let's hear them. Let's hear them, Sophie. Let's hear
Perfect.
some tips. I was just going to say, okay, what would be an example of divergent thinking? What could someone do for that divergent thinking, and then fold that into convergent thinking? Because a lot of us, when we go into problem solving, unfortunately, we just go straight into convergent, which means we stay in the same lane that caused the problem, rather than, opening ourselves up to actually then come back and then resolve the problem. So, yeah, really, really would love to hear some tips on both convergent problem-solving tips and some divergent ones.
Absolutely. So starting with language. So we often, let's say I come home at the end of the day and I say, oh, I'm so tired. I have no energy to do anything. That language shuts down any opportunity for opportunity finding. Exactly. What are you going to do from that? The alternative is to use language such that invites possibility and conversation as well with the people around you. Yes. So using the start sentence starters such as how might I, or what are all the ways I could, suddenly changes the conversation. So I could say, what might be all the ways that I can come home at the end of the day and have energy?
Yes.
It's a different paradigm, because your brain opens to all the possibilities that are in front of you. The other one is around, in terms of divergent thinking, is building on each other's ideas. And this is an improvisational technique. So, for example, someone might say, widget Y is used as an educational tool. And then I might say, what if we use widget Y in the L&D space?
Yeah.
The connection there is I'm drawing a connection between educational sphere and then in a different environment or a different market. And then in terms of balancing divergent thinking and convergent thinking, next time you do a brainstorming session, firstly create space to just go for gold. As many ideas as you can.
Yeah.
Put them down. Try not to judge. And we're very good as human beings as judging ourselves. But try not to judge. Just go for it. Anything and everything. Think about the connections you can draw, even from the objects in the room or the people around you. Thinking in analogous and associative ways really gets you into more breakthrough ideas rather than everyday thinking.
Yes.
And then only once you've got all your ideas on the table do you move to evaluative thinking.
Yes. Yes.
So you're creating a delineation in the space and the time together of when you put on your divergent hat and when you put on your convergent hat.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
people can use those tactics even in meetings, can't they? Like they can actually say, "Hey, for the first 15 minutes, we're just gonna go for it. We're going to effectively brainstorm, as much as we possibly can. We're not going to judge. Then 15 minutes, we'll call time. Now we can get into judging. I mean, it can be applying what you're saying can be as simple as that, and yet so often we just go and it's just the same, which is really killing that creative problem solving. Now, you were going to add a little bit more?
absolutely. One of the interesting things is there is a rule around the third. And let me explain this.
Yes.
When we brainstorm and we're in divergent space, we'll often stop at the most obvious ideas. We'll often stop after a couple of ideas.
Yes.
That is not where the breakthrough happens.
No.
How do we get to the second third and the third, which is typically when you're pushing your ideas further? Well, we bring diversity into the room. We bring different voices who don't have expertise in that problem space, so they bring a new perspective. We go outside. We look for different stimuli to make connections. We bring play back into the workforce, which we know science tells us that play is powerful, and yet we tend to associate it with negativity. We associate it with being frivolous, but actually it is the thing that makes us productive. It is the thing that makes us efficient. It is the thing that enables us to come together and have conversations that we don't usually have.
Yeah.
So creating those environments where we're shifting the way we collaborate with one another is really, in essence, crucial to being able to have the breakthroughs in creativity and resulting innovations.
As you know, folks, the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast is proudly brought to you by Organisations That Matter. Here's a short message from our founder, Gary Ryan.
Tonight I've got a gig on that starts at 5 p.m. through to 8 p.m. I've been up since 5 a.m. The reality is in life we need to have energy for action. We've got to understand how our energy works, because some days you've got to have a long day. You also need to have plenty of energy for your relationships, if you're a parent, for your wife, for your children, for your best friends. You've got to have energy for the physical things that you want to do in your life. We need energy for action. That's the beauty of my book, Energy for Success. In 7 steps, my book will walk you through exactly what you need to do to identify the natural way to have energy for everything you need in your life. It's for the price of a coffee, $4.99 Australian. Seriously, it's the cheapest way to find out and work out for yourself, how do I make sure that I naturally have the energy that I need for all the things that I want to do successfully in my life. Check it out.
Now let's return to our interview with Sophie Tversky. Sophie, when you were sort of talking about the diversity and effectively bringing people into the room or seeking people out that really aren't subject matter experts, for example, there might be someone that's in the finance space, for example, that has nothing to do seemingly with this people's problem that we've got, and yet they might be the perfect person from a naivety point of view to bring in and say, what do you think? Well, obviously got to help them think, hey, we want to hear what you think. We don't want you to self-censor because you're going, I don't know about this subject, so I'm just going to... We actually want the opposite. We want whatever you think are the ideas in your head. We want to hear them, because then we can add them with our subject matter expertise potentially, and something beautiful might pop out, correct?
Absolutely. And that raises a really interesting thought. What's the role of the leader and the team in creating those environments? What are you saying? What are you doing? What's the culture and climate that you're creating to create an environment where people who may not have subject matter expertise can feel comfortable in being open and challenging in a way that is constructive and leads to better outcomes? And that's a collective responsibility, but also a really important responsibility of leaders in the 21st century, I think, as well.
Oh, 100%. I mean, the leader as facilitator in this 21st century is a key aspect of the role, which is very undervalued in my opinion. It's still not understood just how important the leader being that facilitator and creating what's technically called a safe container for people to be able to be true to themselves and be themselves and contribute in whatever way, shape or form that might look like, so we can, get those sparks of creativity happening, so we can then go and explore them and evaluate them, but then ideally come up with new solutions. I mean, what's clear, Sophie, is your facilitation skills yourself and how they have gone through the roof. and that's a big part of what you're doing in Canada now. I am interested, and this is a question without notice for you. with AI being here, it's already arrived. Okay, it's not coming; it's here. A lot of people think AI is coming. It's not coming; it's already here. What role do you see us playing with that? And I assume that your studies in particular might be investigating that at the moment.
It's really fascinating. You're absolutely. AI technology advancements are here. And I think the difference is that we as a society were potentially not prepared for its, particularly ChatGPT's emergence. And that's why there's a lot of conversation around, well, what does work look like in a place where we coexist with technologies which fuel our intellect? And I think that it is really an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for another person technically, another set of stimuli at the table. When you think about when you're putting in an answer into ChatGPT, it will present you with a combination of research, and then you can use that as a spark or stimulus to provoke further thought. My collective, I guess, call to action is that it does not detract in any way from human creativity, and rather it actually zooms in on the importance of originality of thought. And the thing that humans are good at, that it is innately human, is our empathy for others. How do we really zoom into the experiences of others to co-design together solutions that will be to optimize the results for the majority? I think these elements that ChatGPT cannot do, and we still need to harness this technology in a way that is ethical, that acknowledges where resources are coming from in terms of, I think ChatGPT for me is an amazing platform to fuel efficiencies. And we need to be really concentrating on higher level cognitive skills around how do we evaluate information? How do we think about where sources are coming from? How are we thinking about the data and the biases around data that have been fed into that technology? And that is what humans can contemplate about. That is what humans can enact. That is what humans can use their creative problem solving to solve for and to co-design for affected users. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think that it really zooms in on the importance of bringing the human and human-centered design right at the fore.
Absolutely. I mean, with the prompts that you were talking about in terms of the conversation, so even seeing, say, with ChatGPT, it's a conversation. I've been fortunate to already learn, I need to be very descriptive and creative, in fact, with even the prompts. So my prompts are up to 150 words before I even press enter.
Yes.
Right. And then it's like, okay, what are your references? So then I can see the references for what it's produced. So I can go, I still need to use my human understanding and my expertise to go, are they references that are valid or not? Right. Exactly. But the creative work, like, it's amazing the conversation that you have, and you can go, oh, please expand on something that it says to you, and it's like, well, that is a different perspective. It's quite fascinating just how quickly it can be done, but how it could actually spark output that you can then take to a human environment for the human conversation as well. So there's layers and layers to this. What's probably really important, as you mentioned, from the ethical thing, is people aren't just putting in very, very simple prompts, letting it spit something out and then accepting that as gospel, because it's not. That's not how that's not using that tool in any way, shape or form the way that its potential is for us. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just another tool, but it's an extremely powerful one, and it's a great opportunity. I mean, I can't remember the names of some of the technologies that have already emerged, but the ones that are actually creating original art in some respects is just fascinating. Some of the challenges that's going to create for some industries around photography and artists. I'm not sure how that's going to flow over time, and no doubt in your space you're going to see more and more about that. I do want to just flip back for a second to like the courage. I mean, you ask that big question of yourself, and in my next book, which is called Yes for Success, How to Achieve Life Harmony and Fulfillment, which is based on the online program that I've had for a decade now around life planning, and how you came up with your big question. That's actually one of the sections in my system, is to identify what are your big questions, because what you do want is, at some point in time, I want to know the answer to my question. So if you're thinking of creative tension as the tool, at the top of it, we've got, I want to know the answer to my questions. At the bottom of my current reality, I've got my question, but you've done the work to find your question. Then you've got to go explore. You've got to go do some research, and you've got to go talk with people. And clearly you did that. So I would like for you to share, because I do believe you're an excellent networker, Sophie, about what are some of the strategies you've used that have been clearly authentic from my perspective, that have been about building your network that you've then been able to help use to help answer some of those big questions for yourself.
Firstly, thank you, Gary. It means a lot coming from you. I think I'm a firm believer that we are better together, and that every single person has experiences, commonalities and differences to both share and to learn from. Mm-hmm. So that's the core driver for me. And so when I think about strategies, the first one that comes to mind is to take initiative. So reach out, ask for a coffee, say why you're interested in speaking to that person. And there are a couple of ways that could land. One is that someone could say no, and no is just a response. The second one is that they might not answer. And if that's the case, follow up, take initiative, show that you really want to speak to that person. And then alternatively, someone could say yes. And in that case, from my experience, is take initiative in setting up the meeting, doing research of where might be a convenient place for you both to meet. And then during the meeting, if you both connect during that meeting, ask whether that person would be open to staying in contact. And if they do, follow through. Do what you say you're going to do. The second one for me is around curiosity. So do your research. Be curious around what is it about that person that sparks your interest. What do you want to learn from? As I shared, we all are human. We have commonalities and differences, whether it be change, conflict, leadership, growth. These are all the thematics that we experience in life, and some align with our experiences and others don't. And I think all experiences are important to learn from. So be open to what is it about that person you want to learn about, and what is it about, what will you share? Because these relationships are about sharing stories. And I think that leads me to the one that I think is the most important and often is not associated with the term networking, which is be human. Connect as human beings, not as a transactional exchange. So for me, it's being generous, listening, laughing, sharing stories, and building that trust, building that environment where you want to learn from each other, and that if you say you're going to do something, that you do it as well. Yeah.
So take action, be human, and be curious are the three key aspects that you're talking about, which in my view, I couldn't support any further. And as we're about to wrap up our conversation, Sophie, I'm interested. So your own curiosity, your own desire to stretch has led you to Canada. How would you describe the biggest element of stretch that you're experiencing right now? Because you're only 4 months into this journey. What's the biggest element of stretch for you right now?
I think it's really around being intentional. So Canada is really a blank slate. I came technically not knowing anyone. I came with setting up my apartment but never seeing it. I have actually never been to Canada before and spent time in Canada before. So every single day is an act of being intentional around how am I going to meet more people? Who am I going to reach out to? How am I going to learn more about the culture? How do I deeply understand the Indigenous histories of the place that I'm living in? I think really thinking about where I am, a sense of place, who I am with, and what I'm doing, and really zooming in and focusing on what that means and looks like, and keeping myself accountable regarding that experience. So speaking to people in a coffee shop and asking what their favorite thing to do is in Canada, asking someone to share their experience around what working in Canada is like and how it might differ to other places, asking people to share stories around their migration story and what that looks like, because Toronto, where I am, is a place of people from many different walks of life and many different countries, and there is richness there. And so for me, it's certainly around being intentional about every single act.
Yes.
So that I can learn, but also make the most of this experience.
I tell you what, it's absolutely clear to me, and I think it was again from the first time I met you, Sophie, that you are an intentional human being, and how you've brought that and made sense of that with your time already in Canada. As your journey's already been extraordinary, it's going to continue to be extraordinary, because you are an extraordinary human being without any shadow of a doubt. And I just love your energy coming through the digital world as it is at the moment, just beaming through the camera, even though it's very early in the morning in Canada on a Sunday morning when most other folk are still probably underneath their covers. But here you are, and you have 100% practiced what you preach, because you reached out and connected with me and said, hey Gary, was there an opportunity for us to have a chat? And here we are doing it. And that's, as soon as you asked me the question, there was only one answer, and that was yes, of course, let's do this. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for reaching out, connecting, sharing your own story, sharing about your insights around creativity and innovation in particular, and then also about your insights about the AI aspect of that with ChatGPT. We really appreciate that, particularly sharing your insights around networking and also around how intention makes a massive difference to your life, and it clearly is to you. So I want to thank you, Sophie, for joining us on the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And so, folks, we've had Sophie Tversky with us here on this episode of the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast. Please like and subscribe, and if you're on Apple, please go and provide a review. That does make a difference to the search engines. And if you'd like to connect with us via email, please go to orgsthatmatter.com/newsletter, and you can sign up for our email newsletters. Once again, I'm Gary Ryan from Organisations That Matter and the host of the Moving Beyond Being Good podcast, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Ciao.